Hello, friends. Bible study. Romans. It's the NIV, Romans. We're going to do 18 to 32. Now, I'm going to remind you this is a letter written by the Apostle Paul. So these opinions are that of the Apostle Paul. I did not write them. His opinions stem from a society that was roughly 2,000 years ago. Or roughly. Because, it was about 50 CE, right? Or that's what the biblical scholars say. It's about 50 CE. I'm not a biblical scholar, so I'm not arguing with them. So it's not quite 2,000 years ago. So, some of it's a little outdated for here. So just remember that as I go through this. Okay. Chapter 18. The wrath of God. God's wrath against mankind is this. That is the name of this parable. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all of the godlessness and the wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. I.e., you can't cover anything up. Yep, the truth always outs, yeah. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for the images made to look like mortal men, and birds and animals and reptiles. Okay, so what he's saying here is people exchange the prayer for the living God for statues. And he's not being specific of what people, because it was going on in the history, the golden calves in Egypt and all that, right? And in his experience when dealing with the silversmiths and the worshipers of Artemis, right? They had this premise that God, they could construct something man-made and God would live in it. And if you're like, that sounds crazy, who believes, okay, I'm going to give you, I'm not sure how hot it is. Hold on. You're like, what are you doing? Hang on a second. Okay. This is a censer, right? It is made of bronze. This belonged to my grandfather. This is an incense burner. You can see all the resin on the top. I use this every morning when I go to the Eucharist. Inside there is a charcoal disc. Okay, in a church, they use a thing called a crucible. That's the thing where you're seeing them and it's swinging. This has got air holes down at the bottom here, and it sits on feet and stands, so it's stable. I use this every morning when I give myself the Eucharist. I burn the incense in it that is the pleasing aromas to the Lord. Hang on one second while I put this back. It's still hot. So, the pleasing aromas to the Lord. Their belief system is, for me, I like that it's an incense burner. It's bronze. Do I interact with it when I'm doing the Eucharist? Certainly. The pleasing aromas to the Lord is part of the belief system that this is how it is that you communicate with Creator. What's actually happening is that the incense that is frankincense and myrrh opens up our pineal gland. It has a neurological effect on us, and it makes us believe we're having a religious experience. It opens our brain up, so we're communicating, because the communication is happening here not really in the piece of metal. But they have a belief system that's been in existence all the way into the Old Testament, that if you talk to the piece of metal, they'll talk back. That they're in there. Right? Like the same thing with the Ark of the Covenant. God lives in the box. No. He comes to the box. It's not the same thing. Right? You light that, so he communicates. So he's saying they started worshiping the objects instead of the idea. Okay. Verse 24. Therefore, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity, for degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. They're talking about temple prostitutes. So I need to be pretty specific here. Temple prostitutes, both male and female temple prostitutes. What he's talking about is in a time frame in history in which the Israeli people, after already knowing the Ark of the Covenant, after already having God come into their world, chose to throw that away and started having ritualistic sex in the temple. So he's trying to show that, the people who are these Pharisees, these Sadducees, who want to be like, no, we know everything. But no, they're full of corruption. And he's calling out their own history of corruption, as the prophets actually do repeatedly. Men committed indecent acts with other men, received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not be done. They became filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. Absolute power tends to corrupt. Absolutely. Right? They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They're roaming around trying to kill him, trying to find reasons to kill him. So he's got a very particular opinion of them. And, they are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. And these Pharisees sound a little bit like they've become predators to him. That's what he feels. And I can understand why, because they are trying to find a way to murder him. Send him to us so we can have him murdered on the way. That's their plan. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do this very thing, but also approve of those who practice them. So he has got, now I tend to be a little bit more peace and love and kumbaya. Now I like the Apostle Paul when in his level of faith, and then we start deviating when he starts getting into the dark stuff, because you manifest your world. So if you're going to focus on negativity, you're going to bring negativity. If you're going to focus on positivity, you're going to bring positivity. I have this way of isolating. When I'm around too many people who are bringing negativity to me, I will not have that. I need to be at a state of peace, because peace is what I'm trying to cultivate and ground into the world. So, he's obviously feeling some kind of way. That's what I would call this. But it's also not inaccurate. In the course of the Pharisees, you have to go through the Old Testament and read it. If you were to go through the Old Testament and read it, you'd see how often, if it's meant to be a one-on-one relationship between us and Creator, and we're not supposed to let anyone else in and affect our relationship with Him, right? No matter what anybody else says, we're not supposed to pop off the side of our mouth and lose our temper or control people or be nasty. No excuses for treating people crappy. That's what he's saying. We've been able to see it in nature that God is a living God. We are at His whim and we know it's His will. And we're just stubborn and don't want to give over. And humanity as a whole. Most of us do go about our day trying to impose our own will. We have no idea that we're not even supposed to do that. And that is because, indeed, we were led astray. The people who we're supposed to most worship, whether it's because of kings and what they've ordered, or it's the priests, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, take your pick. I don't particularly care. If you're going to blindly follow the leader, if the leader goes astray, you go astray. And that's what people were doing in the culture that Paul came from leading up to this point when he's in his feels writing this passage, because he's definitely in his feels and they are legitimately trying to kill him, right? To have him murdered. That's why he's in Rome. So he's pointing out their corruption, which is actually right and proper. When there is a problem within an institution, we are supposed to say something. Red flags aren't there just to look pretty. They're there so we do something about them. He brought them to our attention so that we can correct it. Because we are, as worship to our Messiah, if you are a Christian like me, are supposed to be leaving the world better than we found it. That's our job. So we're supposed to be looking for the things that we can improve and ways that we can help. So let's be out in the world trying to be better people today.